Good afternoon. Thank you to Netroots Nation and to Emerge for putting on this wonderful program. I'm really excited to be here with four fellow chief prosecutors. In no particular order, I'd like to introduce them. Sherry Boston, who is the district attorney for the Stone Mountain Judicial Circuit, DeKalb County District Attorney, and Caitlin Turner, who is the district attorney for Colorado's 11th District. Sarah Fair George, Chittenden County, Vermont, State's Attorney, and Rachael Rollins, District Attorney, Suffolk County, Massachusetts. I myself am Parisa Dehghani-Tafti, and I am the Commonwealth's Attorney in Arlington County and the City of Falls Church in Northern Virginia. And I especially am happy to be here with Emerge because I was trained by Emerge Virginia in 2018 and ran for office against an incumbent in 2019. And I am just over the moon to be here with women who inspired me to run and to help clear the path for me to run, and the path for women like me to run, women of color, women of varied experience, and also to win. So thank you, ladies. And before I turn it over so that you can speak a little bit about yourself, I just would like to make 3 points. The first is that we have run and governed for change in our criminal legal system. And every community is going to do that differently from the next. But those differences aside, I think what ties us all together is the fundamental belief that safety and justice are not opposing values. So I'll hazard a set of principles that I think all of us can rally around. And those are that not every social ill should be a crime, not every crime has to result in incarceration, and that we need to lift up the voices of victims so that the criminal legal system doesn't add to their trauma. Second, I'd like to recognize that all of us in this, I think that we all recognize that all of us in the system, not just police, but prosecutors like myself, judges, and local government and legislators all have to take responsibility to make change. And the third is that we didn't get here easily. And once we've gotten in, all of us have faced significant obstacles. As of 2019, 75% of elected prosecutors were white men. And when they came up for re-elections, 80% of prosecutors run unopposed. So I'm not going to take time away from the panelists to catalog all of the obstacles that we face, but suffice it to say that even the AG of the United States has made it a point to tell the American people that reform prosecutors don't respect law enforcement, don't care about public safety, and want to destroy America. So what we do on a local level really actually does matter. And at this point, it's actually getting public attention. So in the order that I introduced you, I'm going to turn things over. So Sherry Boston, if you wouldn't mind taking over and introducing yourself, I would be delighted.
Sure. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for Netroots Nation. My name is Sherry Boston, and I am the elected prosecutor, district attorney for DeKalb County, Georgia, which for those of you is a part of Atlanta. And I have been in office since January 1st of 2017. Prior to becoming district attorney, I served as the other elected prosecutor in our jurisdiction that handled misdemeanor cases. I served as the Solicitor General for 6 years. So our office in DeKalb is a felony-only district attorney's office. And I ran for DA because as Solicitor General, I could see that our community was hurting. I could see that our community wanted change, and I had a vision for doing things very differently in DeKalb County. And so with the support of my community, I challenged the incumbent district attorney because I thought that I had a voice to offer not just DeKalb, but all of Georgia as to how we could continue to serve and assist victims with a balance of accountability between seeking justice at the same time, making sure we uplifted everyone in the system and offered second chances when they were appropriate. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be on here with many of my DA sisters in the fight.
Thank you so much, DA Boston. Caitlin Turner, I will turn it to you now.
Thank you. So I'm Caitlin Turner. I am the district attorney in the 11th Judicial District in Colorado. So I represent an area of Southern Colorado. I cover 4 counties in that area. I was appointed last year by Governor Polis to my seat after the prior DA resigned midterm. I live in a really conservative part of the state. I believe I am the first Democrat to ever hold my seat. No one can remember a Democrat ever being in my seat. So prior to becoming district attorney, I spent 8 years working as an attorney and law enforcement officer for the Federal Bureau of Prisons at our nation's only federal supermax prison, which is in my district. I helped the Bureau build a mental health care system for inmates who are in restrictive housing. And that effort was part of a response to the Bureau's largest ever class action lawsuit, where the plaintiffs alleged that the Bureau was not providing adequate mental health care for those inmates, and they weren't. So luckily at the time, Department of Justice took the position that the Constitution would be the floor, and we would go above the Constitution to do the right thing to build a system that those inmates were entitled to. So I'm really proud of the work that I did there, even though I never thought I would end up working in a federal prison. But I am running for re-election because I know that the people in my community want and deserve a district attorney who's going to act with integrity and who will place fairness and justice as a top priority, and who knows that community safety means more than just incarcerating people, who values our problem-solving courts, who values diversion, who's willing to expand those programs. And I've done all those things in my first year and a couple months in office. And I'm up for re-election this November, and I'm really looking forward to having 4 more years to keep growing our efforts. So thank you all for having me today.
Thank you, DA Turner. Sarah Fair-George, over to you.
Thank you, Parisa, and thank you to Netroots Nation for having us and for Emerge for training, I think, all of us. It certainly did train me. I am the state's attorney, is what we call it in Vermont, and I am in Burlington, which is the largest city in the state. We hold 1/3 of the state's population in my county, and I was appointed first, like DA Turner, from our governor in January of 2017, and then was officially elected in 2018. And I have built my platform around progressive prosecutor issues and reforming and, frankly, overhauling our legal system and attempting to really break down barriers for people in the system, but also for victims who find themselves a part of that system. And I'm really excited to be here to talk to people about it and to be here with my sisters that I love very much, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation with. Thank you.
Thank you, State's Attorney George. And now, last but not least, Rachael Rollins.
Thank you. So I am the elected district attorney of Suffolk County, which is not in New York, even though when you Google it, that's what comes up first, in Massachusetts, and that includes Boston, Chelsea, Winthrop, and Revere. Boston is obviously the capital of Massachusetts. There are 11 DAs in our state. I, along with another woman, became tied for the 3rd time a woman had ever been elected DA in our Commonwealth. I am the first woman to ever be elected DA in Suffolk County history. Our office opened in 1806, and the first woman of color ever in my Commonwealth. Part of why I ran in 2018 was exactly where we find ourselves now. I think when we look at a George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Rashad Brooks, we go on. I think many communities knew about this prior to the rest of the world or the nation catching up. And, you know, my background, what I love to say to my dear friends that are congresspeople, governors, state reps, state senators is, you have to be a lawyer to be the state's attorney or the DA. There are certain requirements where I couldn't just complain and say I was going to maybe try something else. I felt obligated to run. And like Sherry, I had a vision for what this office would be. I have been a federal prosecutor, like DA Turner, in the sense that I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Massachusetts. I had also done a DA rotation and worked at a very large firm. But I will tell you, I have siblings and loved ones that have cycled in and out of the criminal legal system. I'm the guardian of 2 of my nieces as a result of substance use disorder and mental health issues. So there's a lived experience that I bring to my job every day that I'm really excited about, because I think one of our biggest jobs is educating people about this system, which too many people get caught up in. And I think all of us agree, you know, when we talk about reformist policies, which I hope we get into, it's not just because we want to agitate conservative people. I mean, that's fun, but we also want to do it because I have limited resources. And if you ask me whether I'm going to go after a trespass or an armed assault with intent to murder, or a, you know, disturbing the peace, or a, you know, 17 counts of assault, sexual assault on a child, which I just came from an arraignment this morning, that's a no-brainer for me. I want to put the time and resources into the violent, serious crimes. And to Parissa's point, we can hold you accountable without sending you to jail in the non-violent, non-serious cases sometimes, and get to the root cause of the problem. So thank you, Netroots. Emerge helped me get where I am, and I'm excited about the conversation.
So Rachel and Sherry, the 2 of you touched on this most explicitly, but given the data of who is in office, I would turn this to the entire panel. Why is it important, especially now, that more Democratic women step up and run for chief prosecutor positions?
Well, let me start by saying that we started off the conversation, Parisa, with you saying that 75% of DAs in the country are white men, and 80% of those run unopposed. Another staggering statistic is less than 1% of chief or elected prosecutors in the country are women of color. And so, you know, this is a fabulous panel of wonderful women. And there's 2 of us on here that are women of color, but this is not the norm. And so what I want to make sure that our viewers understand is that what you're seeing is a very small percentage of the influence that people that look like us have when it comes to being in these district attorney roles. And so for me, I think it's extremely important, because my perspective, my lived experience is a woman, a mother, an African American. All of those things inform how I view the world, how I make decisions, how I run the office, how I engage with my community. And if you have not walked in my shoes and understood my experiences, then you don't have the same vantage point that I do. And so we have to ensure that the criminal legal prosecution system is not dominated by just one voice and one lived experience, which unfortunately it has been through the history of our time. And so it's more important now than ever. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation and seeing more women and more women of color running for these positions and roles, because we have to make sure that our community understands that their voices are being heard and understood by people that look like them and have lived their experiences.
Yeah, ditto. I was just watching something today. A local, you know, newscaster was talking about Kamala Harris, and it was funny. It was 2 white women that were speaking, and they were talking about the gender issues that she's going to face, and never once did they mention her race, which I find hilarious, because now that there's a woman, right, she's just a woman, right? So it's a piece where I want us to not mince words here. Black women in particular, you know, the civil rights movement did tons of stuff for Black men. The suffrage movement did great things for white women. And who was left in the middle of all of that, holding, you know, tons of groceries and bags, but none of the glory is women of color frequently, and Black women in particular. So I find it, you know, I echo everything Sherry says. I think, you know, for me, it's much more about collaboration building, even though there are things I'm firm about. It is more about speaking to people that disagree with me, trying to reach across the aisle as often as I can. There are going to be times where we, you know, aren't going to be able to agree on anything, but I will work as hard as I can to find one thing, even if at the end of the meeting I say, like, well, we can each agree that we are both alive right now, can't we? Yes? Okay, wonderful. Have a good day, sir. Goodbye. But I think there has to be that motivating factor of always educating. And for me, I do think my lived experience informs all of that. All of my chiefs, I'm the only woman of any of the law enforcement officials in in my county. So any meeting we have, the U.S. Attorney, the U.S. Marshal, the Commissioner, the Colonel of the State Police, it's all men. There's a little bit of diversity there, not enough, but a little, not a single woman there at all. So we are able to, and not all women are the same, of course, but we are able to direct narratives in a very different way. We had a horrific felony murder where a young woman on her 23rd birthday was kidnapped and murdered. And she looked beautiful. She's 23 years old. She was out with her friends, but she had, you know, a very cute outfit that if I were 23 and could fit in it, I'd be wearing it too. And all of the comments were not necessarily from law enforcement, but a lot of the comments about what she looked like, where were her friends. And after the U.S. Attorney spoke and the FBI, SAC spoke, and everyone else, I stood up and I said, we are not going to discuss what she was wearing. We are not going to blame her friends. We're going to tell men to stop raping and killing us. And we're going to instruct fathers and parents to start speaking to their sons about consent. That's what we need to be talking about. And I don't think unless you've ever been harmed or lived that experience, you would have that. So I think we need far more women and more women of color as well.
So I'm going to ask, since both of you brought up, rightly so, the very small proportion of Black women who hold these chief prosecutor positions. What's the pushback that you've gotten as a result of that? Do you want to? Sherry, do you want to go first?
Sure. I will say this. You know, I feel very blessed and lucky because, you know, as Rachel is describing what the outlook of her community looks like, I am in DeKalb County, which is the largest Democratic county in the state of Georgia. But our entire criminal justice system and courthouse justice system is led by Black women. You have myself, the DA, the sheriff, the chief of police, the clerk of Superior Court, the chief judge of the Superior Court, the magistrate court judge, our probate court judge, and our solicitor are all Black women. So not to say that that solves all the problems, because there are problems everywhere. But what I can say to you is that because we are a community of women of color who have all had to struggle to, all of us were, you know, became first in our own right, there is a level of support that we do give one another. And so you can't fight one of us without fighting all of us. And remember, you know, I'm still in Georgia. So I explain that dichotomy of where I am, understanding that you drive outside the borders of where I live and where I represent, and it's an entirely different story. But I like to say to people, you know, if you're going to come for one of us, you're coming for all of us. And there is a level of protection that I benefit from, of having like my backup. so that, if and when I say something that gets publicized and I'm being critical of perhaps our governor or leadership, where they are trying to pass laws that I think are, taking us in the opposite direction of reform and going back to law and order, I can stand up on a podium and say it and know that I've got all of these women and other people behind me that are going to support me. So I would say the pushback that I get is really more just not having enough people in the rooms of the DA associations to put forth the things that I want to advocate for. I find myself often having to play defense rather than offense. And so I just don't have the majority to push forward the reforms on a statewide level that I'd like to have. And that is the biggest challenge. And hopefully that will come soon, because there are more DAs every day that are running, women of color, and people with progressive platforms that are trying to win in Georgia. And so, I'm just trying to build up my squad, and then we're gonna see what we can do across the state of Georgia.
So, Parisa, you asked just about pushback and challenges. It is absolutely true that, occasionally I'll be texting Sherry or, and honestly, even Sarah, or if I read something about it's only because I just met Caitlin right now. Unfortunately for you, Caitlin, maybe I'll be texting you later. But Parisa, I called the night I heard she won. We're all watching each other, right? Because it is a really hard job, even for conservative Republicans, right? And again, I am telling you, the trauma and the harm that we see in this role, we are seeing people often on the worst day of their lives. If you're a victim, right, we are there the night that, this happened to you, or you got the call that your loved one was murdered, or this happened. And so there is almost a fraternity of us that just generally, I feel like, however many of us there are, like over 2,200, I think, in the country, of all elected prosecutors, even though I might not agree with the majority of them, I have respect for what they do. The pushback I've learned, I think a little too late, but my attitude now is judge me on my enemies. If the people that are really mad about what I'm doing, if you could put them up on a wall and they look like, the crustiest old people you've ever seen in your life, gray hair, 70s, conservative, this. Okay. I'm not doing it to upset them. It's just they're not used to having anyone in the room that doesn't agree with them or bow down to them. And I think what's interesting, and Sherry, agreed, I think people are terrified because they're realizing how much autonomy we actually have as elected attorneys, elected prosecutors. I don't report to the governor. I don't report to the mayor or the legislature or the city council. I mean, I respect them. I will give them the courtesy of letting them know when I'm doing something. But what I don't think they like is I don't then say, like, can I please? Which is what they're used to. Instead, I say, no. Remember when I called you as a candidate and you didn't take my call because you were sure this man that came in second was going to be in my position? Hi, I'm the DA of Suffolk County, and here are my policies. Get ready for them. I just think they underestimate women in general. And, the more like added, sort of, I would say, swag and flavor and deliciousness you add, right? Women of color, whatever, is the less likely they think we are going to be successful when we strike back. And what they don't recognize is every woman on this panel, we had to be 5 times better than any man that was going to do our job to get here. And we had to prove ourselves instead of being promoted on promise and potential. We needed proven, facts and receipts, right? To quote the late, great Whitney Houston. So again, I will just say lots of challenges, lots of pushback, but judge me by my enemies.
That's great advice. I want to just remind everybody who's watching to please put questions in the Q&A if you'd like our panelists to answer them. I did want to sort of talk a little bit, Caitlin, Sarah, because you have diverse communities. And as Caitlin, you pointed out, you have a very conservative community. So how do you make the case for reform to sort of reach out to people of all sort of philosophical persuasions?
So one, I don't use the word reform because for a lot of people in my district, it's an automatic turnoff, but I'm still doing the work. So what I talk about is fiscal responsibility and the cost of prosecution and how we can save money by not needlessly incarcerating people. And I talk about how our diversion programs lower recidivism rates, because ultimately what people want is to live in a community that's safe, and they want people to be healthy. So if we can divert people to treatment instead of incarcerating them, that's a net benefit for everyone. So my office has actually just started a new diversion program this summer where for low-level drug offenders who are on first charge, we tell them you can go and have 3 sessions with the local mental health care provider, and that also does substance abuse treatment. And if you go to 3 sessions and you engage in those sessions and come back to us with proof of that, we dismiss your case. And universally, that's been accepted in my community. I haven't heard any pushback about it because I think people recognize, even those that want to be tough on crime, they recognize that substance abuse is, something that we shouldn't be punishing people for and that people need treatment for. So, I use different language than other reform prosecutors, but I find when I'm having face-to-face conversations with people, they want the same things. And if I can keep them out of the Fox News rhetoric, we're often on the same page.
Sarah, you want to address that?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I completely agree that your language and words are really important depending on your audience. You really have to know who you're speaking to and what you think they want to hear, but you're saying the same thing. And a lot of that for the more conservative people in our community is talking about, one, not just the costs of prosecution, but the realities of it. So many people think that you bring a charge and suddenly all this magic happens, and to point out to people that that's not actually accurate, that all it does is cost us money and that the return rate is very poor. And talking about the recidivism rates, how high they are for people incarcerated. So not only are we paying to incarcerate them, but we're paying and paying and paying and paying because they continue to pick up crimes. But really just talking to your community too about what they want so that you can, and they'll have your back. If you make promises, especially if you're running, make all the promises that you want to make up front and be really, really transparent about it and very honest with your community about what you intend to do. Because if you do that and then you do those things, they're going to have your back. And you can say to those conservative people that might push back to you, like, I'm doing what I told them I was going to do and I won, so I'm going to do it. And, then they can, police often push back without recognizing that you've said you were going to do this and they elected you to do it. And you don't work for them. You work for the people that you made those promises to. So that's how I usually address it.
And Parisa, what is so fascinating to me, and I love to point out, is police aren't elected and they use their discretion every day, right? Like hundreds of times a day. And for non-lawyers, if you've ever been pulled over and not gotten a speeding ticket, that was somebody using their discretion. Judges use their discretion every day. And in Massachusetts, they aren't elected. But I'm elected and was very bold and clear about who I was going to be. And they hate that I use my discretion, but that's exactly what I was elected to do. So I do appreciate, though, Caitlin being honest about the fact that, it is important that you are, all of us are not operating in the same exact location. And Caitlin, I think Tsarnaev, the marathon bomber, is where you are, correct? Yeah. So, and his death sentence was just overturned. But anyways, but for me, I feel like people need to recognize that. Like when we look at the vice president nominee right now, and people say she's not a progressive prosecutor. Well, we can be using the word progressive, but that means very different things in Colorado and Massachusetts, Vermont, Georgia, and Virginia, right? And it might even mean different things to me and Parisa, who are, you know, simpatico on a lot of things, right? So I think the words matter, and we have to be honest about that.
So let me just jump in and say, because I love this discussion about discretion, because this is where the pushback happens, right? And what Rachel pointed out was exactly, like, people use discretion across the board and aren't criticized for it. But all of a sudden, now that, and I hate the P word, progressive that is, when we are using our discretion to fight for our communities in the way that our communities have elected us to do, all of a sudden that is like no longer discretion. We have just fallen off a cliff, and we are pulling everybody down with us. And this is the problem that I have with our Attorney General right now and his attack of what we are doing on the ground. Because at the end of the day, and I'll give you a prime example, like, I was widely criticized outside of my community when I decided that I was not going to enforce the abortion bill that was passed in Georgia and was passed in many southern states. And I had these DAs that came out in the paper and said, you know, it's your obligation to, you know, enforce all the laws on the books. On the other hand, they sat in a meeting and said, well, you know, if the Democrats win and they try to pass all these gun laws saying we're going to ban AK-47s, then I'm not going to enforce that in my community because my community likes guns. And I was like, okay, pause, time out. How is that any different than what I just did? Guess what? It's not. And I'm not going to come into your community and tell you what to do about the hunters that want to have guns in your community. And I don't want you to come into my community and tell women what to do with their bodies. That's what discretion is. But as women, and particularly as women of color, we are being told that we shouldn't be allowed to use the same discretion that everyone has had in these roles since the beginning of time. And now that you see us banding together formidably in major cities to do this, that for the first time is when you see people like William Barr criticizing us and saying, oh no, you shouldn't be able to use your discretion. When the reality of it is that we only want to give discretion to people that are doing it the way we want it done.
Right, Roger Stone, right? So them, you know, what they did with Roger Stone, it's like, I'm sorry, but I can't null pros a trespass that, you know, somebody, are you kidding me? Right? These are a grand jury, a trial jury, like felony counts, never spent a day in jail. Or even when the rest of the world looks at Jeffrey Epstein, and when I read what Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to do when he was supposedly serving his time, he was like out more than he was in, bending over backwards. And I just thought, oh my God, like if this were a 14-year-old immigrant from the Dominican Republic that had, you know, experienced trauma and had to jump through hoops of fire just to make it every day through their life, people throw individuals like that away. But the Jeffrey Epsteins and Roger Stones of the world, where the wind blows them into every new opportunity, we're going to bend over? No, I call up the hypocrisy every chance we get, and we should.
So let's talk about that a little bit, Rachel. And the specifically the attempts to undermine and devalue your work within your state.
It's amazing. So I actually, when you asked me that question and I was just staring at you like this, my phone rang because we have another municipal court judge. We tried to null pros 5 low-level cases today, he wouldn't allow us to do it, right? And so for the non-lawyers listening, the prosecutorial discretion has been around since like 852 BC, right? Like we that is what we stand for, right? And to Sherry and others' points, no one cared about prosecutorial discretion when we were on a freight train going 1,000 miles an hour toward mass incarceration, because it's, you know, not us, it's them that are going to jail. But now that more sort of, you know, democratic or reform-minded or thoughtful and fiscally responsible people are in these roles, and we're saying, hold on, like, let's just give me a minute, let me figure out if we're doing this right here. Everyone's questioning our discretion. So even before I took office, I was sued by a federal police association. They filed a complaint against my bar license, claiming that my list of 15 crimes, that we were just switching the presumption from jail, which it was before, to, you know, some sort of a diversion program. And it's a rebuttable presumption, right? You can always go to jail. We do that very, very well. But let's just pause and see what the underlying factors are. I was challenged by our governor, challenged by our state secretary of public safety. We sued ICE and won, because ICE was coming in and civilly arresting people in our courthouses, and not for crimes, right? For a civil federal administrative infraction, and then claiming they were keeping us safe. But you just arrested the person that I charged with 4 counts of rape. And now I have to call the victim to say, I don't know where he is. They took him and I can't find him anymore. Like, how is that helping keep us safe at all, right? So the president, you know, Attorney General Barr, my former, or they're still, unfortunately, my colleagues, 4 of the other DAs in Massachusetts moved to intervene in one of my cases because, Parisa, you know about this, they don't feel like I am capable of handling an evidentiary hearing. And the seminal case that's going to come down as to whether you become an adult the morning you wake up on your 18th birthday, or we have a case, Mattis and Watt are the 2 co-defendants. Watt was 17 and 355 days old. He shot and killed Mr. Blake. Mattis handed him the gun and pointed him out, but did not make those additional steps to kill. 18 and 8 months. Mattis is life without the possibility of parole. Watt is parole eligible in 15. And so we're looking at brain science, and the SJC has asked me to do that. And everyone lost their mind because they know that I actually believe in science, but think that I'm gonna not question the expert. Like, there's just this sort of blind shark, rolled-eyed back frenzy that I think conservatives go into, to think that I'm going to risk my bar license to not have a full record. That, like, it's ridiculous. All I'm saying is I'm not tipping the scale down to say, like, actually, let's make it 16, right? Or 14, or all the other arguments that they make. So it's going to come everywhere. The media, you'll see that if you are a media darling and they love you, you'll look like Parisa in every photo, like glam with perfect lipstick. There are photos of me that I'm like, I don't even know where they got that. Why am I eating a hot dog out of a trash can? Like, that isn't even me, right? But it's just this sort of, I can tell you, I swear to God, people meet me, and when I'm smiling, they're like, oh my God, you're like normal and you have teeth, because every photo is me like, right? So you get used to it, and you have to realize, like, I'm okay, you know, that's fine. And I was not eating a hot dog out of a trash can, but they just get very bad photos of you, is what I'm going to say. And the media spins everything. It's like, you know, is DA Rollins, you know, making everybody unsafe? So that was like the headline, where I'm like, why don't I get the benefit of 5 years of seeing whether this works and how I'm getting my feet underneath me, like our attorney general does in my state, or our governor, who, you know, but no, for me as a progressive, within 3 weeks, they were like, why haven't you solved racism? How come murders are still happening? And please end crime. You told us you would, and now we want you out of here.
Well, since there needs to be more of us to change the narrative, there's an excellent question from the audience. And the question is, I live in a purple county in Pennsylvania with a Republican DA who is term limited. There will be a new DA elected in 2023. How can groups in my community, number one, find a potential reform-minded DA candidate, and number two, get public awareness about why my current DA is bad? And Caitlin, since you are in the midst of a campaign, do you want to start with that a little bit?
Sure. So finding someone to run, you know, I'm in a rural area, so there are very few people who are even qualified to hold my seat. But I will say that if the Attorney General, Phil Weiser, had not told me I should apply for the vacancy spot, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have taken that step without a lot of push. I'm glad I did now, but you know, I think you can ask those in your community who are involved in the criminal justice system who they know, or you know, ask within your party who they know, and work early to identify someone and allow them the time to get ready for that race, and get the training they need. I mean, we've all gone through Emerge. I can't imagine trying to get through the selection cycle without my Emerge sisters. They have been there for me through thick and thin. Anytime I need help or I'm just having a rough day in the campaign, which happens to all of us, they're there to pick up the phone, or they're there to text me and tell me, you know, you can do this, you're doing a good job. So yeah, those are, I guess, my pieces of advice for how you can try to find someone and make sure that they're ready to take on that challenge.
If I could jump in too, I just think sometimes as women, you know, I think we want to be perfect or really qualified. And there are men that I know that have said, like, I could be DA. And I'm like, but you're not even a lawyer. And they're like, I could be a lawyer. And I'm like, okay, you know what? These are too many hoops you have to jump through to get to whatever wild dream you believe you're capable of doing. Please be quiet and sit down. And you're 10, right? How can a 10-year-old boy believe already that he could be DA, right? We need to be better at, you know, recognizing that sometimes when we try something and we aren't successful, that failure is exactly what we needed to get the next thing that's going to happen. And it sucks. I'm not going to lie. I hate losing at anything. Like, it's just, you know, who likes it? But I will say we have to be better at trying and recognizing that it is not a failure if you run for office, if you have a great platform, if you broaden your network of people that you know, if as a result, look at Tiffany Caban, as a result of Tiffany running, DA Katz is now more progressive, maybe, right? How did you shift the narrative? Did you start talking? There are women and men that ran in my election, in my primary, that I used some of the things that they said, and I openly acknowledge and thank them for that, because that wasn't something I was thinking about. So I think we have to be better at saying, you know, realizing words are free. So even you, Caitlin, or Parisa, Sarah, or Sherry, myself, if we meet a young woman or man or a person that we think is, you know, exceptional or even just really great, and say, you should try, right? Now, I'm not saying I'm going to endorse you, but I'm saying if you want to call me, I can walk you through what the process would be, but go through it and try. You know, I ran at 47 years old, first time ever running, 47 years old. I want there to be people that are 29, you know, 20, right? 30s, 40s that are deciding to run. So I think we have to be, as the people that are here, not that we're pulling the ladder up behind us, but I think we do owe it to the community to also say, you know, explain to them the process, what it is, or be available as even just a sounding board for people. But I think we have to remember words don't cost a thing. And many people are looking at us and saying, I want to be just like Parisa, or I one day, if I could be like Sarah George or Sherry Boston, you know, even though that might seem like, oh my God, we have to recognize the power we have. So if we can tell people to try, it really matters.
If I could just add one thing to that. I think part of the question was around recruitment. And I think that we too often, for some jurisdictions this might work, but I think too often we look in the party for that answer. And frankly, from my perspective, we need less politicians in these positions and people that just do the work for the right reasons and understand the system. So looking towards people in your community that are doing, you know, maybe they're lawyers for ACLU or for your public defense bar. And that's where I get all my hires from. Talking to the people who you know that are going to support the agenda because of the role that they play. And that way, when they go out there and put themselves out there, the politics don't get in the way. The platform and the morals are really what guide them. And I think that's where people really answer, like people respond to that in communities much better than people that are known to be political and then jump into this race.
And let me just say that we should encourage, like for folks that put this in the chat and said, how do I support them? How do I convince them? Rachel's absolutely right. I mean, it's proven in politics, whether it's this position or any other, that women have to be asked in order to run. And I will tell you, I had to be asked. I had to be asked, and I'm not embarrassed to admit that. But you know, I could not contemplate that on my own. I couldn't see that it took convincing, right, of not just other people, but me convincing myself that I could challenge an incumbent. And let me just say this. So this is what I do now. And I would say to that person that's just like, how do we get that person information? I didn't have anybody to talk to when I decided to do the crazy thing that I did. And people thought that I was nuts running against an incumbent, like giving up my seat to do it. And I didn't talk to anybody in that elected office before I did. And maybe if I'd had, they would have talked me out of it. But what I'll say now is that when I ran against Challenge the Incumbent back in 2016, it was completely unheard of in Georgia. Like people couldn't even remember a time that someone had challenged the DA, let alone beat an incumbent. To the extent that the person that I challenged literally told people, incumbents don't lose. I'm not worried about her. And ultimately, I won with 63% of the vote from my community. But having said that now, this year on this cycle, just 4 years later, I can tell you there are more contested races against incumbent DAs in my state than in its history, all at the same time, because people have seen that it's possible. And I can't tell you the number of calls I've gotten from people that are just like, Sherry, we just want to talk to you about it, how you did it, what you did, how that happens. So, and I get calls from people from all over the country, not just Georgia. So what I would say is tell that person, like any one of these people on this webinar, I know would be willing to talk to anybody that was a candidate that was interested in understanding what it's like to run for district attorney or be district attorney. And I talk to people every day that just want to understand the process, how I do it, and if I should do it. And so we just need to make sure that we open this opportunity and tell people that it's possible, because it is hard, it is a challenge. Most DAs don't have opposition. And I will tell you, we should look at that as an advantage, because it means most DAs haven't had to fundraise, they haven't engaged with their communities, they don't have a campaign platform or structure in place, and they're not ready. You can be ready, and you can do it.
Okay, we have less than 2 minutes left, and instead of hearing me speak, I would really like very short, like 10 words or less, each of you, very quickly to tell the audience, what is your greatest accomplishment? And then we will just shut it out there on a high note. Sarah, start. Oh, no, okay.
No, that's okay.
A minute.
I don't know. I saw the question and I tried to answer. I don't know.
About harm reduction.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them. I'm really proud of a lot of the work we've accomplished in this job. So it's hard to pick just one. I think that making the decision to run and winning and having a ton of community support is really the biggest honor for me. I don't know if it's the greatest accomplishment, but I don't know. It's such a hard question. All right, Rollins, you go.
Yeah, I'll go. So I am in this role. I told you, we see people at their worst. My greatest accomplishment is actually nothing to do with this job. It's raising good humans. And so as a mom and as a guardian of my two nieces, but I also do recognize that these three little girls are growing up seeing a mom and an auntie who is going to fight for every little girl and every person that was forgotten of any color or background, but honestly, what's right. So just generally speaking, I think, you know, seeing people at their worst, it is really important. If you have nephews, nieces, loved ones, cousins, family, raise good people, right? Love them up and do no harm.
That's all really good.
You know, it's hard to follow, isn't it?
It really is. It's all really good. But I will say that taking it back to the office, you know, because everyone knows that I have two daughters. And so getting them through this world is a difficult challenge, but it is my most important job. But having said that, being the first office in the state of Georgia to put a lens on and focus on implicit bias training and ensuring that we are recognizing systemic racism within the criminal justice system, and not just recognizing but doing something about it, is one of accomplishments that I'm super proud of as DA.
Caitlin?
Okay, so my greatest accomplishment, I think, is the Republicans in my community who have said, I have never voted for a Republican before, but I'm going to vote for you in November. And they are like, and then they duck because they're so embarrassed. But I think it's so exciting for me to see that I can do the work that I want to do, and I can gain support from people who otherwise wouldn't have given me a second thought. So that's really exciting to me.
Caitlin, I think you meant to say Democrat. So I just wanted to, you meant to say they've never voted for a Democrat before.
I did. Did I not say that?
You said Republican.
Oh, God. No. So these people have never, ever voted for a Democrat ever in their lives. And I've had several, they come up to me and say on the street, say, your sheriff says good things about you and I'm going to vote for you, even though I've never voted for a Democrat before.
That's amazing. We are running out of time, and I think to riff off of Caitlin's point, I think there are so many reasons, regardless of whether you're a person of faith or a libertarian or a fiscal conservative or a progressive or an anti-racist, there are so many different reasons to be supporting ways to be smart on crime instead of the sort of rote being tough on crime that we had for decades. And so I am going to thank, and I'm going to steal this phrase from Sarah George. I'm going to thank my sisters in justice. And it's a pleasure to have colleagues like you. And I just feel really blessed. So thank you.
Thank you, Parisa.
Okay, Parisa, I think we can close out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, ladies.
Bye, guys.
I hope we can see each other soon.
I know it's going to happen. It has to. It has
does,
to.
right?
I know, exactly. And by the way, I'm turning more and more crazy. Like, I never leave my house. I'm wearing like bear cloth flippers underneath here, and I'm probably not dressed from my waist down. But anyways, all right, I'm going. Bye.
All right.
Bye. Good seeing y'all. Miss you. See you soon.
Miss you too.
Take care.
See you
Caitlin,
soon.
was nice meeting you. Good luck
Good to
with your
meet
election
you.
in November.
Yeah. Good luck, Caitlin.
Thank you.
Bye.
Danielle, I'm sorry that I didn't say emerge at the end. Did at the beginning.
It's
all right. No worries at all. No worries at all. But that was a great panel. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll send a follow-up note to everyone.
I was just having so many warm fuzzies.
I know. Well, and Rachel, like I could just listen to her talk for an hour.
Right.
She is so freaking funny too. It's like,
yeah.
ugh.
But this is recorded, so a lot of people will see it after the fact. So
Great.
Excellent.
Thanks, ladies. Have a good.
All right. Thank you. Nice to see you, Parisa.
I
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
hope so.
Yeah, I know.